Oh, goodness! I haven't seen this book in ages. I remember filling this up as I grew older. There's such fond memories in here. Early on, I knew I was different. I never really enjoyed the same things as other young girls. Yes, I learned my ladylike skills, but I also loved debates. As a girl, I wasn't allowed to learn how to debate, but observation of my brothers was just enough. I think this really helped me form my opinions early on and made me strong with them. I remember Candace. She was our Negro servant at home. Other families thought us odd, but my family was close with her. She was always so kind and gentle-hearted, it was hard not to get close. Oh, I remember this photo. This is where I went to school as a young girl. My older sister Catherine actually ran it. It was called the Hartford Female Seminary. It was one of the best schools for women in the country. I was very fortunate to have such a good education. For a while, I taught there after my schooling, but I felt as if I needed a change later on. So my three brothers, Catherine and I, moved out west to Cincinnati. Once I moved out west, I started to focus on writing. I found that it was my safe haven for my thoughts, since I couldn't really speak publicly. I wrote a few education books, like the Primary Geography for Children. Some of them were fairly successful. For a while then, I continued writing with the Semicolon Club and eventually became nationally published. Through the club, I met my future husband. Our marriage was a unique one. We weren't like ordinary couples. Rather than him being the dominating force in our household, we were both seen as equals in each other's eyes. Our different marriage was in a sense matching my different personality and set of ideals. Once we got married, I was kind of sidetracked with family matters and put down writing. Once I had my first child, I had to be a responsible adult and take care. Oh boy, there's such a story behind this clip. This is from The Philanthropist, which was a very popular abolitionist newspaper in Cincinnati. I remember whenever a group of pro-slavery vigilantes attacked the office of the newspaper and set fires throughout the building. I was outraged and couldn't comprehend why someone would attack a man's rights like that. So I did what I was restricted to do and ended up writing a letter to my brother's paper to condemn the mob for not respecting a man's property rights and freedom of speech. Oh, how I loved this dress. I wore it everywhere, even when I moved to Maine. Along the way, I would stop to visit my brothers and sisters and discuss the things which I could not in public. Many times we discussed the Fugitive Slave Act and how much we opposed the idea of turning away runaway slaves. My family and I, we were abolitionists. This is another newspaper clip which I had kept. It's from the paper I used to write for. I was most known for writing The Free Man's Dream in National Era. My intention with this piece was to tell of the evils which hid in the fugitive slave law. It discussed how a slave was captured by his former owner after a farmer refused to give him food. The farmer felt so guilty afterwards and realized that God's law is greater than the ones that any man can make. It was an overall successful piece and reached many who were on the fence over slavery. After my success with The Free Man's Dream, I realized the power which I held with a pen and decided to take a stronger stance against slavery. I began to write what would become the influential force for the Civil War, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I originally wrote it as installments in National Era. It was a story which discussed the lives of fugitive slaves and the lives they had lived with and away from their owners. I had based my information on stories I had heard from domestic Negro servants which I had hired over the years, as well as stories my brother Charles would tell after his trips down south. I received so much response early on from it that I decided that I should write a novel of the story I had created. And so, a week before my final installment of the book came out, I released the novel so anticipated readers could finish it sooner. I never imagined the impact or the expansion of my book which came later. I heard that on the first day it was put in the market, Uncle Tom's Cabin had sold over 300,000 copies, and that for every one copy of the book, at least 10 people had read it. My book was mostly popular among the common population, but it had not gone over well with the literary giants and abolitionists. Abolitionists said that I had little personal experience with the subject, and that as a woman, out of nowhere, I could not be able to make such a stir when they had devoted their lives to a cause with no results. Although I had received some harsh criticism from the South, I was considered at the time the leading voice for abolition in the United States. I couldn't have ever imagined that at all. A little lady like me at the forefront of this huge movement? It had seemed impossible, but Uncle Tom's Cabin had influenced so many to the side of abolition because they were outraged by the poor treatment of slaves. With the success of Uncle Tom's Cabin, I decided to write more novels for the anti-slavery cause. One of the few included Dread, which explained several scenarios of slavery within the states. These novels never really stood up to the popularity of Uncle Tom's Cabin, but did fairly well and fulfilled my purpose of getting people to listen and be influenced to abolition. During the war, while I was still writing about President Lincoln and his actions, I actually met him and his wife. I will never forget when he referred to me as the author of this great war, and that I was the little lady who started the war. I have never been so honored in all my life to receive such a comment. I finished out my life making speeches with the women's rights movement after I was contacted by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Through all I accomplished, I never thought I could use my works of fiction to reform the culture and morals of this country. I never thought that I could be the force that influenced so many to stand up for what they believe in and to take action.